The American Revolution is what we're going to be talking about next. The British colonists who went to the Americas often made the assumption that they would have full rights of British subjects. Many colonies had representative houses like the Virginia House of Burgesses, and in colonies like Massachusetts Bay, a large percentage of male population was able to vote. For many years, the British had allowed the colonists to live virtually unaffected by taxation, and when taxation became an issue following the 7 Years' War, the American colonists demanded the right to participate in this decision-making process. The 7 Years' War was also known as the French and Indian War, and it drastically affected England's financial situation. Also in the 7 Years' War, the British defeated the French and pushed them off the continent except for 2 small islands off the coast of Newfoundland. The British acquired all French possessions, including Canada, in the Treaty of Paris, but the British were in debt and needed to raise revenue, and they needed to defend their new territories. The American colonies posed a special problem for the British, as the colonists represented 1/4 of the population of the empire, but they only paid 1/100th of the cost to maintain the colonies. So they imposed a series of restrictive policies and taxes, and rebellion started spreading from Boston through the rest of the colonies as American colonists expressed intense opposition to taxation without representation. During the first year of the rebellions, the colonists continued to hope that the British would address their grievances. In July of 1775, the Continental Congress drafted the Olive Branch Petition, which attempted to reconcile the colonists to the monarchy. It was addressed directly to King George III and asked for his help, but he refused to even read it and instead declared the colonists to be in a state of rebellion. By this time, George Washington had assumed command of the Continental Army, and the Continental Congress drafted the Declaration on the Causes and Necessity of Taking Up Arms. At that point, King George closed the colonies to trade, and the war had started. The colonies, which then became states, had no central system of government. They had inadequate military forces and no European ally. However, they did have a common national experience as Americans and a common determination to escape from a system of tyranny imposed on them by the British. These colonists who remained loyal to Britain were mostly wealthy landowners with moderate political beliefs, and they returned to Britain during the Revolutionary War. During the first year of the war, from the spring of 1775 to summer 1776, there was inconclusive action as the British tried to figure out whether they were indeed engaged in a war or simply caught up in irritating plots of the groups of colonists. At first, the war was a struggle that was localized in and around Boston, but following the Declaration of Independence in 1776, the conflict spread. American victory at Saratoga resulted in more than just a defeat for the British in New York. It convinced the French and their new king, Louis XVI, that the new American states might actually win. So they extended official recognition in 1778, and the military alliance and aid were forthcoming. And then with the surrender of Cornwallis at Yorktown, Virginia in 1791, the War for Independence ended. In November 1777, the Continental Congress proposed the Articles of Confederation, and it created a national system so weak it barely had more power than Congress itself. And they were in effect until 1789, when delegates met at a constitutional convention. And they expected to revise the Articles of Confederation, but instead created a radically new kind of government for the new nation based on the ideas of French philosopher Montesquieu. He had discussed the need for a strong central government comprised of branches empowered to check each other. And in the new Constitution, the government's powers were divided among 3 branches: the legislative, judicial, and executive. The legislative branch had 2 houses, meaning that it was bicameral. There were checks and balances established to prevent any one branch from controlling another. And then in 1791, the Bill of Rights was added, guaranteeing individual rights. And this represents the first 10 amendments to the Constitution.